Hi. Um, First of all, my name is Dianne Tarpy, and I would like to thank the Haverhill Public Library and Brendan Kiernan for inviting me. Many thanks to Dan Spears, who introduced me to this lovely group, and I'm happy to be here. Tonight, there were a couple things I wanted to talk to you about and talk with you about, and I'll just give you a highlight so we know where we're going with our evening together. For about the next 25 or 30 minutes, I'm going to talk a little bit about why I write and how I got there. Read from my books, of which I have two that I've written in 2021, and answer any questions you might have. Also, I want to draw some numbers from the folks that are here, and I will give copies of both my books too. Wanted to have some, we're all winners, but tonight we'll have some winners of my books. So how does that sound? Is that good? All right, thank you. Why I write and how I got here. I'm going to be quite honest with you. I didn't start writing in earnest till the pandemic. I was one of those pandemic writers that for the first time in my life was home and had much free time and had what they call the space and the grace in order to be able to do so. I've always written, but never written poetry. I always have usually wrote about subjects on Facebook, which has been social media, has been my platform from which I write and share. And all of a sudden, when the pandemic hit us, it became very evident to me that not only was I finding value in my writing, but many other people were. And that to me was my link. Between Facebook, and we talk about Welcome to Haverhill and a number of groups that are grateful based, if you will, people who are looking for words of wisdom that share. And many people are looking for those these days. I found my niche and I found a market for my poetry. And before I knew it, so many people told me I should write a book. I wrote two. So it was a learning experience, certainly for me. And as my following continued to give me feedback, I was surprised as anyone as to what I could achieve. I ended up writing two books. The first was From the Heart. And that picture actually is Browns down in Seabrook Beach, sitting on their, they have an outdoor deck. And it was my grandson Tyler's birthday. He said, Nana, look at that. And I said, isn't that something? He said, you should write a book and that should be the cover. So that's exactly why that cover is there, because of Tyler Tarpy's birthday. And then secondly, this is my second book, which is called A New Day. This is a picture of a heart down in Bradenton Beach, Florida. And my niece took that picture, it was a picture of a heart. And so much that I do is written from the heart. I felt that was an appropriate picture also. You can take it up. See, I'm very taken with sunsets and sunrises. And they really spur me on for a lot of my writing. As Brendan had mentioned, I worked for 34 years in the corporate sector, did a lot of traveling for Verizon. And in those 34 years, I did a lot of different things, which is the beauty of Verizon. It's such a great company and gives you many opportunities. And one of the opportunities I have that will forever stand out in my mind was the work that I did together on New York during 9/11. And I had often written since that time about that day. That was one thing, even though I wasn't writing poetry per se, I did write about that day because it was so poignant and it was so meshed in my heart and in my mind. And so every year I would write something about that and put it on Facebook. So I wanted to start with that poem because I thought that is like the nucleus of, before I even knew that's what I wanted to do, I was writing about 9/11. I happened to be there that day. I was meeting with a vice president on the 40th floor of 1095 Avenue of the Americas. And the rest was history. That was 8 o'clock in the morning. And when that day ended, it was 2 o'clock at night. And then it started again the next morning at 5:30 with those 3 hours of sleep. And we never really finished to April or May that year, that next year, to be honest with you. But I'm going to tell you that I would say that my first book was good because it was my first. My second one, I believe, is better because I'm learning. I believe in lifelong learning, and this is the path I've been on since I started writing. I'm learning every day how to write better, how to make my words have value to people, and to make a difference with the words that I put on the page. And what I've done is I start out, and for any of you that have seen my book, I start out with the first page being something that gives me a little bit of knowledge about why I'm writing the chapter that I am. Also pictures on Facebook. For any of you that follow me on Facebook, I always put a picture with my poem. Of late, I'm going to tell you the last 3 months, I haven't been writing every day, but I've been writing and not publishing because I want to do a third book, and I want that third book to be very special. But you will always find pictures. I put some of my pictures in the book, not a lot because it's very expensive to put pictures in. This is what I've learned. But on Facebook and on in the different groups that I'm in, I always put a picture with my poems. I'm going to read you from my first book, the 19 years since 9/11, but I wanted to give you a little bit of a preface of that chapter, which I called The Times of My Life. And this certainly was a time of my life that I wanted to share as much for myself as well as other people that would have the opportunity to hear me. And what I did was also use other poets' thoughts or quotes, which would set up my chapter and then move me into what I wrote. And so the second chapter of my first book, called The Times of My Life, and this is what I wrote. And this quote was Emma Hetherington, who wrote The Legacy of Lucy Hart. She wrote, "Life is about time. Spend more time than you do money on others. Give time more than any other gift. Also, take time when you need to. Take time for you when you need it. Sometimes time is all we have with the people we love the most. I ask you to slow down in life, to take your time, but don't waste it." Well, I particularly love those words because time is the one thing that we never have enough of. So I added my thoughts to this first page. It is through the lens of life that my stories are told, sometimes a single moment, most often an experience. All share the fact that they are the words that articulate what surfaced and have become now memories. And this was 19 years since 9/11. And of course, I wrote it back 2 years ago now. It was 19 years when I wrote it. How could that possibly be true? That's how many years it's been since 9/11/01. I shall never forget what happened that day. As I was in New York City meeting with one of Verizon's vice presidents on the 40th floor of 1095 of the Avenue of the Americas at 8 a.m. That day was one of the longest that I ever spent. It was a life-altering, life-defining
Unknown
moment.
caller.
Excuse me for that. I apologize for that. I'll go back to, it was a life, the day was one of the longest that I have ever spent. It was a life-altering, life-defining moment as I worked to try to make sense of all that had ultimately transpired. Hearing first the news that something horrible had happened, and then seeing the smoke, that horrific view and warlike scenario right before my eyes from the 41st floor, I had gone up a floor of 1095, was mind-blowing to say the least. It permanently resides in my mind's eye, a view I will never forget. Working side by side with my colleagues, we worked hard to restore the network as quickly as we could. The thought that is still with me to this day is how everyone pulled together and did all they could to make a difference for themselves, for the company, and their nation. The stories, oh, the stories, I have many I could share. There are many that I could share, but suffice to say, so have many others who were there on that fateful day. I sat with all the leaders who planned the best way through those 40 days and many long nights to rehab Manhattan piece by piece, beginning with the financial sector, where we all had much to lose. What I remember all these years later was that we never, ever stopped until our tasks were complete. It was April or May, I think, before business returned to normal and we got back to our routine. A promise I made to myself as I went through this ordeal was that I would honor all the lives lost for the rest of my life by volunteering and giving back in my hometown community. As we all take pause on the anniversary of this tragedy, I shall always remember my colleagues and my friends who worked side by side with me in the worst of times. They were doing all they possibly could to restore the network and get New York City communications back. But most of all, my thoughts will be with the families as I mourn with them the loss of all the people who perished, workers, firefighters, police, EMTs. I shall forever hold a special place in my heart that aches, in my mind that will never forget what happened on this day. So that's my 9/11 poll. Any thoughts on that? Any questions that you might have? Sometimes you just have to soak stuff like that in for a bit.
Well, what's interesting there is your use of the metaphor as a integrating part of the poetry. In other words, the metaphors that you use are actually blending in with the lines. They're creating a sense of reality. And that's what good poetry does. It creates, it wasn't just that you were there, but when you read it, you're conveying the impression of what it was like to be there and to share it with people at a different time. So I thought that part was really well done.
Thank you, Dianne. Thank you. My second book, A New Day, talks about words of hope and wisdom, and that seems to be the group where I've landed, to be honest with you, to people who were likes that help and inspire and can find in the words I write value that help them get through the day. And often what I'm finding is at first I thought it was just myself I was writing for. And then I fast learned that so many other people were liking these words that I thought, okay, I'm going to learn how to write them better, because I do believe my second book is better than my first. And like I said, I'm hoping my third will be better than even that. And why do you ask that question? How did I get there to think it's better? I actually put more into it. I actually made sure everybody who took the pictures, I made more friends from all over the United States and Canada who are my friends that I share their beautiful pictures. I take some of the pictures myself, but many of them are from friends that I've gained over in groups that have given me permission to use their pictures with my poem. And so that has helped, I think, make the poems even stronger when there's a photograph that people can look at and find that reminds them of a thing or helps them to even read the words and make them a little bit more impactful for them. So this is one that was part of chapter 1 of my second book, A New Day. And it was chapter 1 I called Words Straight from the Heart. I wrote many of my poems that came literally straight from the heart. I felt that there were some days I'd write so fast that I'd think, where are these words coming from? And there was no other answer except from the heart, because there were times that I'd read it the next day and say, wow, that's really good. Or, geez, this is something I could change. But as I said, I'm learning as I go along from everybody that I come in contact with. This group is no different. As I sit and listen to you on an open mic and can gather learning from each one of you and from the groups that I'm in a number of poetry sessions, Poetry of Resilience with James Cruz and Danusha Lamoris, who I've done a lot of learning with. Also Christy Nelson, who writes a network for gratefulness. She actually wrote the book. The name of the book she wrote was Wake Up Grateful. And so I wrote a lot of poems about being grateful and what that means and how that sets us up for our life when we are grateful and we receive things in a grateful way, even though life isn't always as easy as we'd like it to be. So this was one, what I used on this page was a poem from Ralph Waldo Emerson from his collected poems and translations. And it was called Write It on Your Heart, that every day is the best day in the year. He is rich who owns the day, and no one owns the day who allows it to be invaded by fret and anxiety. Finish every day and be done with it. You have done what you could. Some blunders and absurdities, no doubt, crept in. Forget them as soon as you can. Tomorrow is a new day. Begin it well and serenely, with too high a spirit to be cumbered with your old nonsense. The new day is too dear, with its hopes and invitations, to waste a moment on the yesterdays. I love that poem. And that's why I used it on the first chapter of my page to be able to set up for what was coming forth. And then these were my words that I wrote to set up the page. This is the beginning, the place that's deep within, where all my words have meaning and flow easily off my pen. Each of them begin and end in the heart, where the feelings are real. Chapter 1 begins the poem aptly named, Start Where You Are, and then moves on to words that encourage us to listen with intent and do our part, as we have learned that nobody rides for free. And the name of this poem, thank you, Dan. Nobody rides for free. We've learned that. Start where you are. This is what I have learned. The beginning is always today, when you can start over again and again and again. There should be no feeling of failure as long as you never give up, even though you have to start again. Even though the road is long and rocky, even if you feel as though you cannot. I am here to tell you that, yes, you absolutely can. I am living proof of this, is here I am again. My mindset now is different. It is open, positive, and moving. Forward is where progress is taking me. Taking the time I need to appreciate, understand, and be grateful for all I have achieved. I know in my heart that this time I can definitely be successful. Of this, there is no doubt. Today, I will start where I am with faith in myself throughout. Because I've started over again on many different things, and I never thought I was smart enough. I never thought that, I was as smart as some people I went to school with, and lo and behold, I ended up with Verizon paying for my bachelor's degree and then 2 master's degree. And I wonder how I got there cum laude. And I thought to myself, gosh, I never gave myself enough credit. Well, I think we often don't give ourselves enough credit for all that we have done, right? I'm one of those people that don't give myself enough credit, and I'm learning as I go. I'm at 7:37. Do I have time for one more thing? Do you think that would work, Brendan? One of the things that I've worked and sat on a few really Zoom calls, and I was one with Northern Essex, and they asked me to speak on joy. And I did write some articles on joy that I thought were a couple poems that I thought were good. And mainly because in this time and place, I think we all need a little bit more joy, right? And knowing full well there's always something to be grateful for. So that was in that particular Zoom that I was on. She asked me to write, what are the things that I've learned through my life that have helped me? So I actually call it Tarpy's Top 10, and I share it with my grandchildren. I have 8 grandchildren who I adore and love, and my 3 children, of course, that are grown now, and they have my husband. So I'm luckier than most and blessed with what I have. But this is what I call Tarpy's Top 10, or what matters most. Number 1, show up. You're 99% there if you show up, even if you don't feel like it. Number 2, be kind. Everybody has a story. Number 3, do your very best. It matters not how old we are. It has come to what I've realized is doing your best will always be good enough. Number 4, be a solution maker. There is always a way. Number 5, smile. Everything is better when you smile. Number 6, don't give up. No matter how many times you must start over, and I think my poem that I read sort of reflects that, don't give up. Number 7, collaborate. Learn the art of collaboration. None of us can do it alone. Number 8, make your word your bond. If you say you will come hell or high water, do it. Number 9, believe in yourself and start before you're ready. Yes, you can, no matter what it is. Yes, you can. Number 10, do not condemn or complain. It depletes your energy and makes you emotionally unavailable. So those were 10 things that I just offered. And I send these things to my grandchildren. Some of them they receive with open arms. Some of them it's another, oh, Nana, another poem. But even if some of it seeps in, I know that I've done my job, and that hopefully it will benefit them. So I thank you. I thank you for the time of being here with me. I would tell you that I am, and I mentioned this the last time, I'm on the board at New England Poetry Club. And they have, for any of you who would like to send in a poem to our contest, it actually is over on May 31st. It runs April and May, and I'm actually coordinating that those contests. There are several of them. If you go online and see, you'll be able to see New England Poetry Club will give you the various poems that you could enter, the type of poems. And just thankful to all the people that I'm learning for. And again, I'll mention all of you included here. When I'm on an open mic, I'm not always the chattiest one, but believe me, I'm listening to everything that is written and everything that's said. And I'm thankful to you. I'm thankful to people like James Cruz and Denisha, who have read, helped with Poetry of Resilience and the things they've written. And they've brought people like Mark Nempo on, which have been just a joy to learn from. And then Christy Nelson, who, a network for gratefulness, I have learned so much from. So from each person that crosses my path, I'm thankful to them because I learned from each of them. So thank you again. And I'm glad to answer any questions, or we can move right on. I'm going to have Brendan draw a couple names, and I'll make sure that each one of the names he draws will get 2 copies of the book, A New Day and From the Heart. Somehow I'll get them to you.